Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Celtic Unrestricted View podcast. My name is Ryan Clifford, and today we have a guest podcast, and it's professional footballer Callum Ferguson. Callum played his trade in Scotland, and he's also played overseas. Callum, as I said, he played in Scotland, Inverness, Montrose, Aberdeen Rovers, some teams in the lower leagues, obviously been abroad. I'm really glad to have you on, mate, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Oh, it's good to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me, and hopefully we can cover a wee bit about Scottish football and then full abroad as well. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good chat.
I think because you played in Scotland, mate, I think for me anyway, it's interesting to obviously know about your background in playing professional football in Scotland. But how's things at the moment, mate? How's life at the moment? Obviously, COVID times hopefully coming to an end. How's that kind of been through you the last few years? Obviously,
To
in
be
your footballing sense.
Totally, mate. To be honest, it's been a difficult one. As you mentioned there, I kind of fell into the footballing lifestyle of playing abroad and going from country to country for a wee while. So obviously, COVID made that extremely difficult. And just like any other way of life, even in the professional football scene, if you're a foreign player playing in different countries, suddenly it's harder to get visas, it's harder to get accommodation, it's harder to move around the place,
Mhm.
and that was a real issue for a while. Lucky enough, I managed to get out to America and played a wee bit there, and an opportunity came up in Ireland to kind of move a wee bit closer to home. But my international clearance fell through in that deal. So basically, I can't sign a contract at the moment until the summer due to international clearance issues with FIFA. So I'm back in Scotland myself, mate, and just sort of being productive in other things that I do until I'm ready to sign a new deal once the transfer window opens and I can move on from the wee bit of a nightmare with my international clearance. But that's how it goes when you jump around the place from country to country.
Obviously, see on that, Callum, I don't really know much about it myself, mate, but see, like the visas and stuff, is it basically is that going to change football for maybe the worse or for the Scottish teams maybe the better? How do you think yourself how it's going to work with getting clubs getting deals done?
There's going to be a bit of a change, to be honest, because obviously in terms of your international registration, whenever you move from country to country, you need to be re-registered with a different FA. So if you're going from
Right.
America, it's US soccer, I need to register with the Scottish FA in Scotland to sign here, for example. But then, as you said, the other side to that is visas and work permits. And something that's actually changed at the moment is obviously with Brexit coming in. Britain leaving the EU in terms of visas and work permits, that's a question that's being asked. So that landscape is constantly changing, and especially with COVID as well, we're entering into times where questions are being raised that weren't before. So it's one of those where those established markets of players sort of going from Ireland to Scotland or Scandinavia to Scotland, that's kind of going under a wee change just now. It's
Mhm.
nothing too major, but I think we will start to see a slightly different outlook of players signing both in Scotland and abroad from Scotland over the next couple of years. As I said, the market is definitely changing a wee bit.
So I know obviously when it comes to transfers anyway, Scotland the market's crazy because of the value down south. You just need to look at some Celtic players that have went for big money in Scotland, but if they were playing down south, it'd be a lot bigger. Obviously, you play football yourself, mate, so you'll know the markets can be quite kind of, I'd say, a bit deceiving because some players go for money they maybe shouldn't be going for.
It's crazy, isn't it? And that's, I think it's one of the downfalls, and it always has been for Scottish football. To be honest, is the neighbour down south and the money and financial investment that they have. Just Scotland can't compete with that, and I feel like that's something we need to all accept up here, and something that we need to look at our own model and look at. Right, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? And how can we do these extra things to bring ourselves up to that level so we can compete with England? Because you just have to look, and I can only talk from my own experiences, but playing football in Canada and New Zealand, for example, these are emerging nations with football. Football is growing there, but they do things off the park that I
Mhm.
didn't see in the Scottish Premiership in Scotland to bring themselves up to that level. And I think it's an easy excuse to sit and look at England and talk about the money they have, and we all know that, and we've known it for years. So how can we be creative? How can we give ourselves the edge? How can we do things that they're not doing? Be ahead of the curve, if you like. And that's the only thing you can do, because financially Scottish football cannot compete. And it's not to say that we can't do things a bit differently to give ourselves an edge. I'm sure we'll dive into that over the podcast.
Yeah, I'm like you, mate. I definitely agree that you look at all these, obviously you've done it through experiences yourself. You can see a lot of things that maybe other countries do, and considering maybe the money that we have, this might not be mega bucks, but I think you can do certain things better, maybe value-wise with money. But obviously, Callum, you grew up in Inverness youth teams. Is it Ross County as well? Was that a part of your youth setup as well?
That's right. When I was 5 or 6 years old, maybe I think I went into Ross County's youth setup originally. So from there, I was there for about 3-4 years before I made the switch across to Inverness. And I was an Inverness fan. Grew up in the city. So for me, that's when the opportunity came up. I had to go. And at the time, it was exciting times for Highland football because Inverness just got promoted to the top flight for the first time in their history. So their youth program was new. It was getting invested in. It was an exciting new thing. So it was actually a great place to be, and we got a lot of good experiences playing against obviously the best teams in Scotland from a young age, and a lot of players benefited from that and would go on to make first team appearances. So a wee bit of a unique footballing, upbringing in the Highlands. It's definitely different from how it is down in the Central Belt. Smaller pool of players, and that's always how it's going to be in the Highlands. But it was a good place to start the journey, and luckily enough for me, I just progressed through the youth ranks and eventually into the professional setup, and that's every kid's dream for a team that you support.
Yeah, it definitely is, mate. I think for not every male, but for a lot of kids, football's a dream. And obviously these days more money's involved. But when I was younger as well, I think I'm roughly the same kind of age as you, mate. For me, it was just to play football. It wasn't really about the money. It was just to play football. And obviously, see when you're younger, Carl, how did you actually get? I know you're saying 5 or 6, but how did you get spotted by kind of at that early age to get into that kind of setup? Because that is quite an early age to get into a professional setup.
Totally. I mean, I was just football obsessed, like a lot of people. I was every kind of holiday, football camp, or school coaching with football. I was there with a ball. So, I mean, it's one of those where I remember I went to some Ross County coaching after school, and the coaches immediately came up to my parents and basically said, "Look, your boy's got something. We'd like him to come along to training in Dingwall and see how he enjoys it," basically. And from there, straight into that sort of pathway of Ross County, who had a lot of good stuff going at the time. But when Inverness got promoted to the top flight, Ross County at that stage weren't in the top flight of Scottish football. So the power then shifted across to Inverness in terms of youth development. And for me, as a young boy and being a fan of the club as well, that's where I wanted to go, and I definitely benefited from that over the years. So it was, a unique place to start the journey. But like you said, it's one where kids can get into it very, very young, and I think that's a good thing, because when clubs get you early, you get the full sort of, you get the full immersion in that environment, and it definitely helps you through your career. But at the same time, as we all know, there's loads of boys that get bypassed over the years and they come into it later on in life.
Yeah, because I've kind of noticed a lot with kind of guys who I played with and stuff that they actually, well, me personally, I didn't get into it. It was like boys' club kind of pro youth type thing, but I was maybe 14, 15. I wasn't maybe like your age, so it's quite a. I would say it's a very good early education to get into football that age under a professional setup, because a lot of kids these days, like you say, they might just go to football camps, but that's it. They're not really getting. They're just playing football. They're not getting an education at that age, which I think's very beneficial for yourself. It's obviously landed you in good stead because you have turned professional.
That's the thing. Like when you go into these environments in the day, I think a lot of people obviously look at youth academies and think about how many players can we get through to the first team. You know, that's what everyone talks about. But for me, it actually goes beyond that. It's how many families can you get involved with the club? How many kids can you turn into supporters of the clubs? How many fans can you get through the gates? They might not make it as a football player, but they might go into physiotherapy, or they might go on to become a coach to later coach the club. And I think that's it's one of the principles that's quite often missed when people talk about academies. Is yes, we want to produce elite first team players from their local communities, but at the same time, you want to create qualified a part of your club as well. And that's, as I said, especially in the Highlands where there's a fine pool of footballing talent in the communities. You know, you need to look at that kind of holistic approach, and it's definitely something that's overlooked. But end of the day, it's when you go right from that age through to a first team, you see all the stages that you have to go through, all the development processes, and it's quite a unique experience. So I feel very, very grateful to have gone through that, and then eventually, as you said, go pro of the club at 16 or 17 years old.
Because obviously, before we come on to the podcast, we've obviously spoke about most of the time guys who do make it professionally. They do a lot more sacrifices than guys who maybe don't make it. I know myself, I've played with guys who were far, far better than me. Far better than me, but didn't get anywhere near any setup because I don't know if it was sacrifices or if maybe they want to play a higher level. I don't know, but I've seen guys who have actually stuck to. They've done everything they can. They've practiced. They've done sacrifice, and that for me, Callum, I do believe that if you do sacrifice and you do put your effort in, for me, effort does get you a long, long way. Obviously, the ability comes with that, but I think if you're showing the sacrifices to get to where you want to be, I think for me anyway, I think it does come to fruition when you do come professional. I think some guys don't realise how much you need to actually do to, if that's where you want to be full time. I think it's totally different with just playing amateur or junior or 21. I think you need to actually. I think these days you need to actually put the effort in because it is a hard job to get into full time, I would say.
Oh, totally. And the game's continuously changing, you know. And I think just over a short period of time, you look at professional players 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, a lot still kind of a heavy drinking culture around football. Not to say they're not talented players. What they could do with the ball was incredible. But that kind of athletic side of the game has totally changed over the last 20, 30 years. And now you have to be an athlete if you want to play football at the top level. And being an athlete isn't just your physical capabilities. You need to be strong in the gym. You need to obviously have the technical skills, but how you look after yourself as well. So when you're growing up through the youth ranks, you know, when you're going 16 and your friends are starting to go to parties, some of your friends are starting to drink, you know, it sounds silly and people say this, but you make those decisions where I've got training, I've got games, you know, this is priority, this is what I'm going for. And when you go into full time, it's the same thing, you know. You're looking at that first team at 16, 17 years old. That's where you want to be, and you're modeling the senior pros that you see, you know. It's and that's why your environment of whatever club you're in is so important, because it is monkey see, monkey do. You know, you're a young boy going into these professional setups, and how the first team conduct themselves and how they sort of have that professional approach rubs off on the young players, because you're so desperate to get to that level. And for myself, Terry Butcher was the manager when I went full time, so it was one where that was probably about as old school in education as you can get in Scottish football. Obviously, the big man's got a reputation that speaks for itself. And for him, it was very much, if you're a young player, your feet are firmly on the ground. You know, you're doing these jobs, you're cleaning boots, you're helping out with the kit, you're learning your trade, and you've got to kind of earn your stripes to get up to the next level. So, I mean, I feel lucky that I got that education. Because I think that is something in itself that's starting to fade out now in Scottish football and across the world as well. So for me, that was sort of an eye-opening experience into that sort of old school mentality, and also the principles that can come from that. I definitely learned a lot and took a lot from that.
Because obviously when you say about the jobs, obviously, that you've done, the boots and the stands, etc. I just couldn't see. I just couldn't imagine like just like Ange Postecoglou saying to Dembele or something, 19, but listen, me man, on you go and clean the boots. I don't think it would happen anymore. I don't know if it's to do with health and safety. I don't know why it doesn't happen anymore, but I think, like you say, it would give you a good education. Listen, if you this is what you'll see, that when you get here, you'll get the training grounds, you'll get to see the players, you'll train the players. So you're kind of leading up to, this is where I should be, but that's where I want to be. So you'll do the jobs. And I'm like you, mate. I do think it's dying out of Scottish football. And I don't know if it would ever happen again, but I'm like you. I think it's good for the young kids to get that education to actually, this is what you can get to if you learn your trade.
Totally, man, and it's something I could tell you a couple of great stories just now, and I will. I'll dive into some stuff, but it's one for me where when you go in as a young kid, I've always had this sort of mentality where I like to observe environments, I like to learn, I like to try and be, I don't know, I like to try and absorb what's around me and why are we doing this, what's the benefits of it, and for me, it really taught me to respect every part of professional football. When you get in from training and you bang your boots and you leave them on the floor, some young kids got to come and clean them up after you. So don't leave a mess down the corridor because someone's got to hoover that. When your training kit's done after training and you throw it on the floor, someone's got to come and pick that up and wash that. And it's the whole, like, loads of us look at a first team 11 players or the first team squad, but it's the whole unit that goes in behind that that's actually the full package. The kit man's just as important as any player in that dressing room. Same as the cleaners, same as the cooks and the chefs. Everyone plays a part in the team, and that's something that I learned as a kid. One of the jobs I used to do is I used to help out the kit man. So after training, we'd go through, take the kit through, and wash it, dry it, and then fold it out and put it out for the first team, and obviously then under 20s after that as well. And I remember, well, it was me and someone, I guess your listeners are very familiar with, Ryan Christie. It was me and him that did this job after training, washing the kit and cleaning the kit. And one night we went home and we got a call at 5:30 from the kit man and one of our coaches basically saying, you missed half the kit. The boys need it for tomorrow. They're in training. Get back here, And we'd left the stadium. We'd gone home. We had to then arrange to sort of pick each other up, come back into the stadium, open up the kit room, go back in, get everything washed and cleaned, done by like 10 o'clock at night, and you're back in the morning for training, So that's how it was. It was an old school mentality, but at the same time, that definitely makes you appreciate everything that goes into being a football player, but everything that goes into a football club as well if you are lucky enough to get to that level.
Because see some of the jobs, I know it might sound daft, but did you enjoy doing these jobs because obviously you're working, but because you're playing football, you don't really see it as a job. You just see it as part of learning the education, basically, at the club.
Oh, mate, some of it you enjoy, and other ones you hated it. To be honest, like I quite enjoyed cleaning boots, for example, because you get given so the boot boy gets given a player. So I had Billy Mackay at the time, and there's a striking coach at Inverness, Duncan Shearer, who again is a Scottish football kind of iconic figure, and he would always say to me, "You need to mirror your game off Billy Mackay. You're fast, you're sharp, your movement's the best part of your game. He's where you want to be. Watch him and learn." So for me, cleaning his boots was a part of that as well. Like that's you earning your stripes and getting up to that level. And also, if you're lucky enough to get a good Christmas bonus from one of the boys, you're getting a wee bit of money for it as well. So there's always a bit of crack there. But then there's other jobs where, it being Inverness, there's plenty snow and plenty frost. So over the Christmas time, they used to take out covers and put it over the pitch to stop it from obviously freezing over and to keep games on and to stop the surface from just getting worn out. So we'd have to get up, well, if it's a Friday night, put the covers on before the game, get up early on a Saturday morning and take the covers off the pitch. And because snow and frost and everything had fallen, your hands are freezing, absolutely freezing, trying to peel these covers off. Hours. And to be fair, Teddy Butcher used to be out there helping out, him and Maurice Malpass, helping the young boys take the covers on and off the pitch. But we used to hate that because it was the worst. It was the worst job going. But as I said, you wouldn't see that happen in many places around the country now, and it's one where I definitely learned a lot from that. It grounds you. It keeps your feet on your ground. And we also, when the manager changed, John Hughes came in after Big Teddy Butcher left to go to Hibs. And then we got a totally different insight into another manager with a different style. So I was actually very fortunate to get sort of both ends of the scale there, which was a unique education for sure.
Obviously, how was it you set up it? And obviously, I'm a bit older, so you can maybe remember a bit more. But cause I've been told by obviously a friend of the podcast, William Glavin, he's asked me to mention how was the training ground. He says it was a bit of a cow field. Is that right?
It was, mate. Yeah, it was Fort George, basically right the way out beside an army base up in the Highlands, and it's right by the sea. So you're getting the wind and the rain straight off the North Sea coming in and hitting you in the face. And as I said, it's an army facility, so it's rough and tumble. And saying it's a cow field is kind. You'd go to take your first touch, and if you're not switched on, it's bobbling over your foot and you're getting a rollicking. And Teddy Butcher used to love it because he said if you can't control a ball on this, then you've got, you don't have the technical skills basically. So if you can control a ball here and you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. But when Big Yogi came in, he hated it. He thought the surface wasn't, because Yogi, as you know, is all about total football, likes to play 1-2 touch, keep the ball moving from side to side. And he wanted the pitch rolled. He wanted it ironed out. He got the groundsman out there and did everything he could to turn this cow's field into a bowling green. And it was the best it ever looked, to be fair, because for Teddy Butcher, it was long ball football. It was hit the channels, get your lines up, get support up, and go from there. While as Yogi's approach was totally different. So he got to work on the surface up there and totally flipped it around. But it's, again, stuff like that. Inverness still train there, that's their training facility, and nothing's changed in, I think they've been there for 20 years old now. So it's one where, that's some of the facilities that what was a top flight club in Scottish football, and they went on to win the Scottish Cup and play in Europe, working with facilities like that, So when you go and talk about the parallels between England and Scotland, that's just at a different level.
Well, that is obviously finances is a big part of it, but it just shows you that you don't need to have the best facilities to have a very decent, successful season or team under. Obviously, it depends on the manager and the players, but it just shows you facilities isn't everything.
No, totally, and that's one of the things with Inverness. I think there was a unique kind of blend going on at the time where Teddy Butcher had kind of installed that never say die attitude. You're in it as a team, everything's against us. We're in the north of Scotland. We've got the worst training ground in the league. We've got limited resources, but we're all in this together, And in Teddy Butcher's team, someone would throw their face on the line to stop a ball going in the goal. Likewise, at the other end, someone would chuck his body into somewhere where he's going to get hurt to try and score a goal. And that was the mentality in that team. While as when Yogi came in, obviously he then took those foundations and he taught them how to play technical football. Not that Teddy Butcher's wasn't. Teddy Butcher's was just a very different style of play. Whereas Yogi then took those principles and introduced a technical passing game. And, I feel like you had the perfect blend going on at the time of that old school sort of ethics and morals, with then that forward thinking modern football that has lit up sort of the game over the last wee while and has become football as we know it now. So I think that was the reason that Inverness are so successful and were able to go on to win the Scottish Cup and play in Europe, is because you actually had these two unique, totally different contrasting ends of the scales come together at the right time. And you had a dressing room that was brilliant. These guys, people talk about player-led environments, that's exactly what that environment was. It was characters in the dressing room. And I've seen nothing like it. It was a special environment, and there definitely is something to that, where you can have all the best teams, you can have all the best players in the world and have all that talent, but if you don't have that togetherness, it doesn't matter. You're not being successful. You're not winning trophies, and that's the perfect example, for Inverness to go and win the Scottish Cup and achieve it was remarkable. And I'm not sure it will happen again in my lifetime, to be honest. It was something that was really, really special, and definitely a lot of people up north took it for granted at the time.
I think it's for me, it's something. I'm like you. I don't believe facilities living. I think I'll touch on, obviously, guys in the change room a bit later on in the podcast, but I do believe if you get a good training ground and they're all singing off the same hymn sheet, it does really help, and obviously ability will take care of itself. But if you've got that behind enemy lines, should I say, behind the park, you've got that to go out of the park with, knowing you've got guys next to you that will basically run through brick walls for you basically. But for me, I want to know is, obviously, I didn't make it myself. So, when did you know that? And obviously, some football players are cocky. Some football players just know they're good. And again, that's what comes with being a good footballer. But when did you know that you actually had in your mind that I'm going to make it? Is it always been in your mind, I'm going to make it? Or was there a certain time where you thought, I've got a good chance here?
You know what? It's a great question. And I guess there's two things for me. One thing was when I was playing under 17s football at Inverness, Duncan Shearer was our coach at the time, and the big man had a special part to play in my development. Him being a striker, he really taught me how to look at the game in a different way, how to be clever, how to know what you need to do, what your job is. And he really helped me to tailor my game towards my strengths and what I could do as a striker. And I was really fortunate to get that sort of education from him at a young age. And then he went on to become the under-20s coach, so the reserves, if you like. And then I transitioned into full-time football from there. And Big Dunk helped me a lot and gave me that real edge to my game. And it was round about then where I thought, I'm really kicking on here. I'm doing well. And I think, I don't know, I must have been 17, 18 when I got my first call up to the Canadian youth national team. And that was probably the second time that for me, it starts to become a reality, because I got called away. I should say my mum's, although I don't sound it, my mum's Canadian. She was born in Toronto, so I've got a Canadian passport. And when I first got on the bench for Inverness, basically that's when the Canadian Youth Soccer Association reached out and said, look, we've been keeping tabs on you. We've seen you got called up for the first team. We want to take you in. We went to Spain for a tournament over there, the Catif tournament, and we played the likes of Argentina, Spain, who else? Mexico. The list goes on. It was an incredible experience. And at that time, the Canadian Soccer Association were doing all these extra stuff off the field that I'd never seen before. Like, you're talking sports science, watches that monitor your sleep. And this was back in 2013, 2014, watches that monitor your sleep, how stressed you are, your recovery, big recovery boots to put on all the way. You can get full body suits that came up your body, and like I said, that was at the time that this new technology was coming in. They were right on the ball. And for me, that sort of got me really excited. When I went back to Inverness, I was getting this unique exposure to a different way of looking at football, because Inverness had none of that stuff. All the best trying to get recovery boots at Inverness Cali Thistle at that time, or even trying to get a watch that monitors your sleep. It was an old school environment, and we make the most of what we've got. And just to be clear, that was fine with me. and like we've talked about, that installed a certain way of thinking in myself. But when I was lucky enough to go away with the Canadian youth national teams, it really opened my mind to another side of football. And I'd say that's when I properly got really excited about my own career, my own opportunities, and also what I wanted to do in my career and where I wanted to go. That was definitely the start of the bug, if you like.
Because obviously, I know international football's even at youth level, it's not full time. It's a bit part here and there. But was that when maybe you got the full fruits of I could be a full not could be a full time footballer, but was that maybe the outlook of this is what I could maybe get if I got up the ladder to play maybe a better team, i.e. Celtic or Aberdeen or whatever, at a higher level in Scotland? This is what I could maybe get.
Totally. No, you're on the ball there, and that's, I guess, when I went away with the Canadian national team, a lot of their young boys were from MLS clubs like Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and these clubs treated their young players totally differently to how boys were getting treated in Scotland. And just to be clear, if you're at Celtic's academy or Rangers academy, you're getting a different education and a different experience than you were at Inverness, Caledonian Thistle at the time, and the vast majority of other Scottish academies. So away with the Canadian youth teams, you were speaking to these boys, and you're picking their brains about their environments and basically how they were treated, And for me, that got me really intrigued. It got me thinking, I want to get out there one day. That's somewhere I want to play. I want to experience that. And I feel like in Scottish football, we've got a lot of talent. I know a lot of people don't maybe give us the credit we deserve, and we maybe look down at our own game. While as my perspective is the talent is undoubtedly here, but I think there's sort of a culture problem where a lot of people in Scottish football kind of won't look out of the bubble. They won't go and look across North America or Australia or New Zealand or China or wherever it might be. And they kind of think, oh, if it's not going to work out for me in Scotland, it's not going to work out for me at all. While as really Scottish players are valued, and any European players are valued at a totally different level in these different countries because they've not had the same upbringing as we've had, the same education as we've had in football. People live and breathe football here, as you know, it's a way of life. While as in places like North America, they don't. It's ice hockey, it's basketball, it's NFL, and football's got to compete with all of these things. It's a totally different upbringing, and that's where, if you come from these footballing nations, they regard your knowledge, your experience, and what you have to say at a different level. And it's one where, I'd like to see more Scottish boys making these transitions across the different leagues, and hopefully we will over the years, and we are already. Over the last couple of years, you're seeing that take place.
Yeah, for me, I'm like you, Callum. I don't think our game's bad, especially the Scottish, the SPFL. I don't think it's as bad as it's made out. I just think it's always compared to down south, the money, etc. Because I do believe there's guys at Aberdeen, even in the Nation Championship, that can step up. I do believe there's talent everywhere, even the Highland leagues, the Lowland leagues. I think there's talent everywhere that could step up. But for the Scottish national team, you just need to look at the squad. You've got probably two of the best left backs in the world, Tierney and Robertson. You've got guys like McGinn, McTominay, McGregor. It's full of talent, and like you says, there is a culture difference in Scotland to a lot of these other countries. And for me, I'm like you, mate. I believe that's maybe one of the only things that stop us from getting to these World Cups and getting to these Euros every year, because it's no because we've not got the talent. It's other thing to do with that, for me anyway.
Totally on board with that. It's, for me, I couldn't agree with you anymore, and it's one where in Canada, when I played there, there's a whole emphasis on promoting Canadian talent. You're only allowed a certain amount of foreign players to sign in the league. At the time when I was there, I think it was you're only allowed to start 4 foreigners in your lineup, with a max of 6 on your roster or squad, as we say here. And basically, and then within that, there's an emphasis of you had to have a certain amount of under 21 Canadians in your matchday squad or starting the games as well. And there's a real push there because they're hosting the World Cup in 2026 with the US and Mexico. And everything about the Canadian kind of movement with soccer right now is building up to that sort of finale. And it's growing at a crazy rate. And we all know how soccer took off in the USA. And it's more of they see it as a brand over there. It's anything and everything to do with the club that matters. It's how you sell your business. It's how everyone in the community feels a part of that, which is a total different approach to here. You know, they don't have the same historical connections and culture within communities as we have here. You know, the likes of Celtic and Rangers going back 200 years in Glasgow. You know, that doesn't exist over there. I had to try and build that from nothing. Whereas in Scotland, I think we've fallen on our morals a wee bit, and we've sort of have accepted that these fan bases are here. These people love the game, and no matter what, they'll support our clubs. And that's not the case. You know, you need to go into communities, you need to help people, you need to get fans on board, you need to sell your business, you need to take in investors and sponsorship. And like you said, all of that then filters into the national team. If players are getting chances to play at their clubs, and you're promoting youth talent, and you're getting lots of fans in the gate, that all filters into the top level of football in our country. And, you know, I also, like we were talking about mirroring England, you look at our league setups, we've got the Premiership, Championship, League One and League Two, exactly the same as England. You know, why do we have that same pyramid structure? We don't have anywhere near as much clubs as England do. Yeah. We don't have as many, we don't have as much sponsors or businesses or investment. And I believe we should really cut down the Scottish leagues to an SPL 1, an SPL 2, both professional leagues, and outside of that, regionalise it. And, you know, we've got enough clubs at a high level to compete in there, and make them bigger leagues, maybe 2 leagues of 15, 18, and then you give boys that chance to go and play. Because a big problem, I think, in our country is when boys break into the SPL at the top level, you look how tight that table is right now. If you go in and play a couple of young boys, you could go from 4th to bottom of the league and get relegated and lose your job. You know, who's going to take a gamble on playing young players? So as we could dive into this more, man, but I think it's one where that has to change. You know, we have to look at our product and tailor it better towards Scottish players and our sort of unique game here, because we do have the talent, we do have the clubs, and we just need to sell it to the rest of the world.
It's something we've spoken about on this before, on the podcast before, Callum, because obviously Celtic, Rangers now and the B teams are playing in the Lower League. Some ways were like, it is a good thing. It's maybe not a good thing because they're only playing, yes, it is competitive football and they're playing against men, but how can you go and play against, like, again, it's no offence to these teams like Bonnyrigg Rose, but then expected to go and play against Aberdeen next year for them to step up. It's very hard, but obviously they've got to have a pathway somewhere. But it's what it's like you say, maybe we could talk about this for hours, because there's a lot of things I think we could do better, i.e. change the league system, or as it change the quality of how we do things. I definitely agree with you, mate, that there's a lot we can do. Something I'd like to ask, mate, see at Inverness, obviously, I think, was it 2015 for your debut at Inverness?
That's right, correct? Yeah. That sounds right.
How was... Did you know that you were going to make your debut? Was there an incline 3 weeks building up to it that you were ready to kind of step up to make it? And obviously make your debut for your boyhood club must have been, even if it's for 2 minutes or a full game, it's still absolutely amazing.
Yeah, no, it was. I think it was a special moment that'll stay with me for a long time. To be honest, it's one where I was away in January. I got called away with the Canadian under-21 squad for World Cup. Well, under-23 World Cup qualification, and we went away to Jamaica. We were away for a month, and we were fully expected to qualify. We had a really sort of talented group of players at the time, and we fell flat on our face, unfortunately. We got knocked out by Honduras eventually, and we kind of, you know, we really let ourselves down, and we let sort of, I don't know, because it's a group of boys that had moved together through that Canadian youth system for a while. So obviously I then returned to Scotland pretty disappointed. But at that time, Billy Mackay was just sold from Inverness to Wigan. So the moment I got back, I was very much aware that Billy Mackay's just left, our main striker. And basically, the moment I got back, it was right. This is your chance. You know, you've been away, you've been playing international football, you've been banging in goals for the reserves. You know, and actually, you know, it was one where I was chomping at the bit, and I think my debut was against Kilmarnock in a 3-3 draw, and it was, I don't know, that's, as you say, it's every kid's dream at the stadium to come on into that game.
Yeah.
And straight away, it's just a blur from the moment you go in there until the moment the game's over. You just do what you can and hope for the best. And after the game, you know, we didn't pick up the 3 points that we were obviously going for. And I remember Big Yogi pulled me aside in front of everyone, and he went through me. He was like, "If I'm ever going to put you on the pitch again, you need to get on the ball more. You need to get in more dangerous areas." And he just went absolutely through me in the changing room. And I later found out that he did that for a reason, to basically test my character, to test my response, to see if I was man enough to take it on the chin and be ready to handle that kind of environment, you know. So with these kind of managers, there's method in the madness. You know, some boys would shy away from that and go into their shell, and then, you know, well, maybe this isn't for them. You know, I can't rely on them in big games. So straight away, that was a wee edge for me to go on. Right, here we go. You know, this is the real deal. And I went on to make a handful of other appearances for the first team before I got a bad injury. I dislocated. Well, I sort of slipped the disc in my lower spine and had really bad sciatica. And this was a problem that would haunt me for a couple of years until I was able to sort of get my career back on track. So for me, you know, it was a blessing and a curse, because you work so hard, like we've talked about, to get that sort of dream debut and to break into the first team, and it's all happening for you. The club are looking at a third place finish in the league, qualification for Europe, a Scottish Cup final, and I was sidelined, and I had to watch all of that unfold. You know, after breaking in, after doing the hard bit, and that was difficult. It was really challenging to sort of watch all of that materialize when you had broken in and you had got there, and it just kind of slipped away from you through the injury. So it was a special time, but also quite a hard one to deal with at the same time.
See, obviously, you were saying the Scottish Cup final. Was that the year? Was that the year that they won it? Yeah.
It was, yeah. That was the year they won it.
Well, obviously, I don't know. I don't know if it's all changed now. But did you get a winners' medal for that, or did you need to play a certain amount of games for that?
You need to play a certain amount of games to get that, I'm afraid. So I missed out, because originally it used to be if you were in the squads in the Scottish Cup, you would get a medal. So I was in the squads in the build up to, I wasn't involved in the Celtic match because my injury just happened before that famous semi-final with the Josh Meekins handball. But it's one where, you know, I missed out on getting a medal as well, and that's that's how these things go. But it's, you know, such a historical time for the club, just to be a part of it. To be honest, obviously the medal's a souvenir and a special thing to have, but just to be around the changing room, to be down at Hampden on the day, to be back in Inverness for the celebrations, being on top of that open top bus as it goes through the city, with the streets absolutely crowded with people, a lot of people, you know. And we had a big party down at the Northern Meeting Park beside the river. And at the time, you think this is brilliant, but you totally don't appreciate the level of what the club had actually achieved. And you look back at that now, at Inverness, who are in the Championship, struggling to get out of that league. And towards last year, they were looking at maybe falling out of the league. And it just makes you realise, wow, that was such a unique opportunity and a time in Inverness. And, you know, these things, it changes like that. And I remember Big Yogi pulled a meeting pre-season after the Scottish Cup win, before we went into the Europa League games. He pulled a meeting and basically nipped it right in the bud, and he said, look, we've achieved things that this club basically should never have achieved, and we're riding the top of a wave. And if we don't make changes now, the only way is down. And he said there's no possible way of climbing any higher unless we push this club to a new level. So unless we get more sports science, a new training ground, all of this stuff. And he stressed me. He was like, I need the first team boys. I need you to back me up here. I need you to support me. I need you to help me push for this stuff from the board, from the club, to keep us on top of that wave. And unfortunately, it didn't go the way that John Hughes wanted. And a year after that, he left the club. The club then get relegated, and it turned out to be right what he was saying. The only way was down after that. And it's actually, that was something I learned a lot from. Is although you've been successful, don't stop now. You have to make changes when you're successful to continue success. And if you don't, there's going to be a nosedive, and there's going to be a rebuilding job after that. So lots of lessons to take away from that experience.
Because I think obviously, for what you're saying, it's a total different experience to obviously the way Celtic were last year, but that's the way I can kind of look at it in a type of scenario, that it just shows you how hard it is to win trophies and stay on top and stay on top. Like Celtic every year, they won 7, 8, obviously 9, and they kind of stopped at 10. But for me, with Celtic, it was a situation where they signed players, but they didn't sign quality to keep them there. It was guys just to, I don't know if it was just to please the fans, but the strategy wasn't there. Maybe like John Hughes is saying, you've got to have a strategy to keep pushing and keep going. And like you say, if you don't do that, eventually something's going to give. And for Celtic, it was 10 in a row. It didn't happen because the club didn't push for me to back the manager at the time. But see, obviously that must have been an unbelievable experience. I know he says it must have been very hard for you. See, because you were injured, did you still feel part of it, or was it a sense you like, I don't really want to be involved in it, and that kind of because you weren't part of it, but you were part of it, if you know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, I think that was definitely a wee part of it, to be honest. Like, obviously, you sheer excitement and sheer joy because you're a part of the squad. Obviously, these are your friends. This is your club. This is your city. So obviously, you're invested in that. But there is a part of you as a football player. I think there's obviously you're part of a team, but there's obviously you as an individual as well. And there is part of you that's obviously, I was gutted not to be able to have been a part of that. But the game works in funny ways. Like if I'd kept on being fit and if I'd played, they might not have gone on to achieve those things. Like that's how the game goes. And the older you get, the more you learn to deal with setbacks, and the more you learn to sort of stay mellow. And when it's high, keep yourself grounded, and when it's low, just keep yourself ticking over. But I think definitely when you're at that young age, you are vulnerable to the sort of falling out of it and feeling like you're not a part of it. And that definitely, at the time, that was a part of it. But the following season, I basically missed the whole of the following season through this injury. And for me, that was the worst part of it. That's when I definitely felt like I fell out of it. You're not training. You're looking at an operation that never happened for me. Just constantly getting back fit, and then having to go back to the drawing board, try something else, and go again. And that year for me was one where I definitely felt like, although I was part of the first team squad, I wasn't. And that's something where I think in those scenarios, I learned a lot. I learned how to sort of how to deal with that kind of setbacks. And you also notice the other side of the game, which is when you're doing well, everyone wants to be your friend. Everyone wants to be in your corner. The manager's got his arm around you. People are talking about a new contract, and everything's going swimmingly. But when things aren't going so great, who's there for you? Who's there asking how you're doing? Who's there sort of checking in on you? And all that kind of stuff. And you definitely see a change in football, and that's the nasty side of football. And for me, that was a real learning curve. I definitely took a lot from that. And for me now, whenever I see anyone going through a similar setback or a similar situation, you can't help but feel sorry for them and empathise with them because you've been there yourself, So, as I think some players are really fortunate and they continuously they have a continuous kind of steady incline to their career without any maybe major setbacks. Not to say there wasn't setbacks, but not anything major going wrong. And I think when that happens to you as a football player, it teaches you to look at the game a different way, and sort of you learn a lot, because it opened my eyes to the importance of looking after your body physically and mentally, and also kind of how to be the sort of rounded pro, if you like.
Because for me, I totally get where you're coming from, where football players who get injured now, guys maybe out for 3 months, 6 months, a year. People talk about they're getting money and stuff, but we all know that that's when you're injured, lying in a hospital bed, or you're lying in a bed. Money's no, it's in your mind. It's getting back playing football, and it's your mental state. Because I've had 2 bad injuries myself, so I've had a double leg break in my PCL, which obviously that stopped me from playing football. So I've went through mentally, I've went through depression, mental health and stuff through that, even though I wasn't full time. So that's not my job. I can still do my job, but these guys like yourselves, you're out for a year, you're out for 6 months, and you're trying to get back. That from the mental side must have. I don't think it's spoke about enough in football for footballers personally. Carl, me, I don't think even guys at Celtic, you've got Big Julian was maybe out for a year and a bit. He's struggling to get back into the Celtic team. Guys like that must be like, how am I not playing? I'm trying to get back in. It must be very hard mentally, but you've got people outside of football who've never, like you say, has never been injured. They don't know how these things work. But he's getting 15 in a week. But that's not the issue here. It's in there.
Absolutely, and it's a major issue in football. To be honest, it's one where, obviously, the football environment in a changing room, there's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of egos as well, and it's one where people maybe shy away from being honest. There's maybe a wee bit too much crack and a wee bit too much sort of banter kicking around the place, and that's fine. That's part of the game, and we all know that, and we all enjoy it. But there definitely has to be more awareness given to that sort of honesty and openness around the struggles that come with football as well. And whether it's an injury, or you've got gambling problems, which is a real thing in football as well, whether it's drink, which is another real issue in football, you name it, there's numerous issues that boys deal with. And it's one where you go from these cocaine highs where you score a goal in front of 10,000 fans and you wheel away to celebrate, and that adrenaline hit that your body takes in that scenario is incredible. It makes you feel amazing. To then go to a changing room that's empty, you're in the gym by yourself, you're watching in the stands, and you're not getting those same adrenaline rushes, those same highs. Your body gets addicted to it. It does. Your body starts to crave these chemicals that are released in that moment. And when you don't have that, people tend to look into other places to get that, like we've discussed, whether it is drinking or whether it is drugs or gambling or whatever it may be. And it's a real issue in Scottish football, and not just Scottish football, but football as a whole. And not just when boys are playing, but when they stop playing, similar concept, their careers are over. They're no longer the superstar that they used to be. And these issues in mental health and well-being creep in. And for me, it's one where the PFA in Scotland do a lot of great work. They're there to support people, but there definitely needs to be more awareness and more support around that side of the game. And actually education, I think, is the biggest thing. Boys go full time, giving them that education young and early about how to look after themselves and different resources that are available, and support groups around that as well. Because we've obviously seen a lot of good stuff in Scottish football recently, with more awareness, especially with I'm forgetting the name of the club now, but when people were signing for the team and holding up the shirt, that was I'm forget the name's slipping my mind at the moment, but that's a good example of something that did raise awareness in the game. But it's definitely, it's something that needs to change, and that's hopefully something that can come into place over the next years.
I'm trying to think as well. I'm not sure. I know Motherwell done a wee piece. Was it Motherwell? No,
I think so. I
know Motherwell done a wee video, and there was a few players saying I've had this issue, and I've seen it on Twitter, and I thought it was really good. again, I don't know if maybe the bigger clubs, i.e. Celtic, Rangers, can maybe do it, and it might bring more kind of more attention to it. Personally, just in Scotland these days, if Celtic Rangers put something out, there's more chance of getting viewed than it would be Inverness or Motherwell or Aberdeen. But obviously, you say Inverness. See, I've always wondered. See, Inverness, as a full-time player, what was your kind of daily routine? Like, for you got up till you went to bed, what was it? Was there anything that you done different to what maybe guys do play amateur or junior, etc.?
Yeah, so essentially your full time sort of schedule in Inverness was you got up about, I don't know, 7:30, get yourself ready, report into training for 8:30. There's a kitchen, so you can go in and make yourself some breakfast, grab whatever it is you need, do a hydration test, sort of get your kit ready, and you're out training by 10 o'clock. So training then sort of a 2 hour workload, and typically in a week, Monday would be a recovery session, Tuesday would be quite a hard technical session, Wednesday you'd have off, Thursday again would be sort of technical, and Friday is game based, set plays and sort of last minute tactical tweaks before a game on the weekend. So you're obviously keeping in your gym work in between those training sessions as well. But for us at Inverness, there was no gym programs written for you or no products given to you as a youth player, or when you got into the first team for that fact. You were just expected to sort of know what to do. And if you had any questions, you had to go and speak to the physio or the sports scientist around there. So obviously you've got a heavy training workload as well as what you're doing in the gym. So your recovery is important, but your load would vary if you're starting or if you're not starting. And that's something that gets tweaked. And then players that maybe weren't starting, there'd be a reserve game on a Tuesday and you could play in there. So, I mean, you flip that to that sort of standard schedule, I would call it, in Scottish football across a lot of clubs. Whereas if you flip that to training routines that I had in North America, or even in New Zealand for that fact, you're going in, you get your breakfast, you get your lunch after training, you're training every day, you're in the gym every day, you've got a program specific to your body and your needs. They're monitoring your load, your GPS, how many kilometers you're running, how much sleep you're getting, how much recovery you're getting, and all this data gets fed back in. And if you're fatiguing and you're working too hard, they'll tell you you're not training. You've got the rest from now until the game and the weekend. While as if I tried to say that in Inverness, I'm feeling a wee bit tired, I don't fancy training today, someone would put a boot across your head, and that's and that was the difference. These sort of markets, I guess, in America and Canada, they look at football in a different way. It's what can we do to give our team an edge? We'll do anything and everything to give our team an edge, whether it's the best gym programs we can give our
We seem to have lost connection with Callum, but we'll be right back on once we sort the kind of technical issues out. Thanks, guys. Callum should be back with us in a few minutes, guys. Laptop crash, so we'll be back in a few minutes. Cheers. And we're back, mate.
Jesus, mate, literally my whole laptop on full charge
Sorry.
just went bang.
Sorry, we're still live anyway. It's all right, mate.
I
We
was,
were saying obviously it was about your day, about your schedule on it, about training.
yeah, that was it. Do you want me just to jump straight into it?
Aye, far away, mate. Far away.
Totally. Yeah, so saying a wee bit there, obviously, about the difference towards your training schedule across in North America, for example, and in Scotland. It was in Scotland, you do your training, you're expected to go to the gym, and outside of that, it's look after yourself, be ready to play, you know. And obviously in North America, they took that to another level in terms of the sports science. With you'd wear watches that monitor your sleep. You then report that into a wellness survey every morning. You report how you're feeling. Are you feeling fatigued? Are you feeling a wee bit tired? Uh, how's your sort of mental state as well? Are you feeling stressed? Are you happy? Are you sad? You feed all this into your morning survey that basically will generate a score which will tell you you're overtrained, you're maybe not done enough in the gym this week, etc., etc. And these statistics are passed on to the sports science team, which will then tell the manager if you're training or not, and if you are training, how much you're doing. Everything is monitored and everything is stat based as well. During a game, straight after a game, for example, they'll give you a sheet that has your kilometers you've run, how many sprints you've made, how often you walked, the positions that you mainly played in. So, as a striker, are you in dangerous areas? Are you not? How often you gave the ball away? How much you created opportunities during the game? All of this is passed to you after the game as well. And that stats would then feed into how your training would be shaped for the following week. So, that kind of stuff is top level, you know, and that's something that is really developing a lot at the moment in football, as it's becoming increasingly statistic based, and not just in terms of how players are playing and how they're training, but also how teams sign players. You know, is he a type of player that's going to buy into our system? Does his statistics match our statistical profile for our team? And, you know, I think we've all seen Moneyball, the movie, and, you know, that's prime example of how it was in North America. And the sort of training schedule there was very different and very fluid compared to the rigid structure in Scotland, which was your day off is a Wednesday, you're training now, you do your gym now, and you play. So that was, again, I've been lucky to experience the two sides of that coin. And I think more and more in football, as the level sort of gets more athletic, we'll see more and more of that getting introduced. But you also need to have clubs that are forward thinking and looking to give themselves an edge, for example. So if you look outside of Celtic and Rangers for that level of statistical feedback, you know, in Scottish football, that's not there at the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely getting more stat-based football, definitely. You see, I've seen a lot of kind of podcasts recently, and I've kind of a few ex-professionals I've said, like Sam Allardyce, who's just big on stats. Everything was stats. It was like 20% chance of this can happen and 10% chance this can happen. So play the ball there. It's absolutely crazy. I think sports science is definitely taking over football, like you say there, Callum. If you're too tired, the sports scientist says not, he can't play today, he can't train, and I think it's just going to get even more used in football at the highest level. Obviously, you says Inverness, you can play the Ryan Christie as well. My dad actually coached a team called Glasgow Heart, it's an amateur team, and he plays a guy who plays for his team called Martin Lang. Have you heard of him?
I have, yeah.
My dad asked him, he says, I know him, asked him about him. I said, I need what I'll ask him. But Martin was, he's actually just playing amateur now, but was Martin quite kind of good at that level as well?
No, Martin was, you know, Martin was always sort of a leading youth player coming through the academy, and he obviously his first team for I think a season under Terry Butcher, and Martin was one of these boys who is such a nice lad, such a good character to have around a football dressing room. But unfortunately, I don't think he ever made an appearance for the first team. You know, he was part of the first team squad, but he just wasn't given that opportunity. And that's sometimes what it takes. You know, you just need that one manager to look at you and go, right, you're ready and you can play. Because Martin was a very talented and technical player. You know, would keep the ball moving from side to side, would break up play excellently, but he just needed that manager to give him a chance. And you know, Martin was and is a very intelligent lad. And I think when things didn't quite work out at Inverness, you know, that's one of the difficulties in the Highlands is there's no pyramid system as there is in if you get released by a Premiership club in the Lowlands, you can go and sign in the Championship, or you can go and sign League One, and you can sort of build your way back up. Whereas in the Highlands, if you leave Inverness or Ross County, there's Elgin City in League Two and the Highland League, and that's it, you know. And a lot of boys will go into the Highland League and earn a good money from the game and enjoy their football, but there's not that pathway out of the Highland League as there is in the south of Scotland. So that's one of the typical traps of being up north, you know. And at that time, there's a few boys that have gone on from the north of Scotland to do really well. Obviously, the main one on this podcast is obviously Ryan Christie, whose name speaks for himself. And then from there as well, Nick Ross, who's a couple of years older from Ryan, who's now playing in America and the USL. And these boys have gone on to have great careers. And it's one where that's the more and more people that go and break the mold and go and play at the top level and go play abroad, the more doors that open for other boys that come through that Inverness Academy as well. And it's one where I can only speak for myself, but I know you look through these boys who are breaking into the first team, and you want to see them kick on and do well. But like I said, you know, people like Ryan Christie and people like Nick Ross have firmly, Liam Polworth, I guess, falls into that category as well, who's now at Kilmarnock, have broken the mould.
Obviously, you mentioned Ryan. I know you're still in contact with him. Could you tell at that age when you were playing that Ryan was going to go to either a Celtic or he was actually going to make it at that level?
Yeah, no, Ryan has always been a good friend of mine from a young age. We were the same age coming through the academy, and we went full time at the same time, and we went first team at the same time as well. So I've been lucky enough to kind of see Ryan progress over the years and sort of turn into the player that he is now. And he also, when you watch Ryan's journey, one of the great things about Ryan's career, I guess, is under Terry Butcher, Ryan wasn't necessarily the type of player that Butcher liked. While as when John Hughes came in, immediately he put his arm around Ryan. He told him, "I believe in you. You're going to be the best player at this club. You're training with the first team every day." And he backed them to the high heavens. And you know, that confidence that Ryan took from that, he just went on to deliver. Made his debut, scored his first goal not long after that, broke into the team, and he just kept rising from there. You know, earned his move to Celtic, and obviously had the loan to Aberdeen in between that as well, where he backed himself and proved himself as again, and he's continuously done that, and it speaks a lot for his character. But I think the biggest thing for me was seeing that transition when John Hughes came in, and that belief and that confidence that Ryan gained from that was what took him to that new level. You know, he always had the talent, he always had the ability. That was always there from a young age all the way through. But sometimes you just need that manager to really look at you and go, he's, you know what, he's for me. I believe in this kid. And that confidence that Ryan took from that, just, you know, he never looked back. He just kicked on from there. And that was the biggest thing I think I take away from watching his journey over the years.
So I think for me, sometimes it only takes, as you say, one manager to say one thing to you or do one thing with you, and it could totally change your fortunes. Like you said, Martin didn't get the chance. You get a chance, Ryan get a chance. It just shows you that if people get the chance, how it can actually lead the pathway. I've got another wee question on the live here, says Callum. Does each player have individual programs for performance improvement alongside their training as a collective? I don't know if that's something that's involved in kind of SPL level football.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm just reading it there. So it totally depends on what club you're at and where you're playing. If you're playing in a club where, like I mentioned, in the Canadian Premier League, where I was with Valor FC, you've got your own tailored individual training program as well as your program as a collective, like you've said there, for a team. So, for example, a big part of that is obviously what you do in the gym. So I'm a striker, so my game is based a lot on movement in behind the back line. So I need to stay quick and agile. which is slightly different from a centre half who has to stay strong and heavy to in his kind of positional sort of his game tailored to his position. So your gym programs are obviously different depending on where you play in the on the park, but also your physique and your natural kind of build. But then also in terms of your training with a team, there's firmly tactical drills and shaping that you do as a unit to build towards a game. But then also you'll get broken away where strikers will go away and will work on finishing or crossing and finishing or movement behind the back line. So there is firmly that sort of you break away to work on individual stuff and you come together as a team. But that all varies on where you're playing and who the manager is as well. You know, it's not the players that control that. You get told what you do in training. And in North America, that's a big thing that they believe in, which is breaking out into these wee groups to then return as a unit. Whilst in Scotland, that's not so much the style. It's more you're training as a unit instead of these kind of breakout sessions. So again, that varies from manager to manager. And that's I don't know, I guess a lot of people don't appreciate how much of effect that can have on players as well, because that time to work on your own game, on your own weaknesses as well as your strengths, can be the difference between you hitting form and going on a wee run or not so as well. So these are the sides of the game that people don't see because it's the work that goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that for me, I know football players. It's not just a 2 hour, 3 hour training session a day. It's a lot. It is your life. It's as soon as you wake up to as soon as you go to your bed. It's a constant. It doesn't matter if it's Inverness, if it's Celtic Hearts, or if it's Barcelona, Celtic. You're trained to be an athlete. Your mindset is mentally to be an athlete, and that for me, that's the way it is. And I think some people outside the football who don't know the ins and outs of the football game, they don't really realise that. They just think you're getting all this money for kicking a ball, and I'm like, it's no, it's just simple as kicking a ball. These guys are getting paid because what they do is they're sacrificing. Like you say, we've said in the podcast, you're sacrificing going to the bookies all day with your pals, going out drinking with your friends. There's a lot of things involved with women these days. Football players like going out with women. It's just there's a lot of things entailed being a footballer. But obviously, Cam, you went through Inverness and you've went kind of a loan spell at Montrose, down to the lower leagues, Albion Rovers, Elgin City. How did it go from full time to part time? Was that a big hindrance in your career?
Yeah, no, it definitely was. Like I think we spoke a wee bit about the injury that obviously I picked up, which kind of pushed me down that path that otherwise I didn't really see myself going down. You know, and that's life. Things happen, and you find yourself in situations that you didn't expect. And for me, obviously, I struggled initially to make that transition from training every day to then twice, 3 times a week with Albion Rovers and a game at the weekend. And I guess one thing with Albion Rovers is I was extremely fortunate at the time that the environment there was excellent. You know, you had Darren Young as your manager, a young up and coming manager, Billy Stark as his assistant, and then from there Tony McMinn as head coach, and a lot of boys from that team have gone on to bigger and better things. Ross Stewart down at Sunderland was at Albion Rovers at the time. Ross Stewart at Hearts, the goalkeeper. Who else can I think of? Theo Archibald, who's played in League One and League Two in England, and you know, Connor Shields, who's now at Motherwell. You know, so there's a good percentage of that team went on to play at a higher level, and I think that was League One at the time. And like you said, it is a transition. It is totally different, and it comes with a different mindset where training is less based on tactical and preparation for games. It's more prepped on boys have been working all day. Let's take them in and prepare them and get them moving and get them ready for building into a match day. So it totally flips. It's a different approach. You can't go in and teach and coach a part-time club like a full-time club because they're not. And the boys are not able to manage the same loads as full-time players are. You have to respect that they're working and have other careers. And for me, the plan was always to go back to full-time football. That was a big motivation for me, was to get over my injury issues and to get back playing and take that step back into full-time football. But saying that as well, I think at that stage I realised how fragile a football career can be, whether it's an injury or a manager doesn't fancy you or anything else that can happen. I took that time to sort of invest in myself as well, and I'm a Scottish Gaelic speaker myself, so I started doing some work with BBC Alaba and the Gaelic radio to basically sort of get back involved in that scene and kind of learn a wee bit about media and different skills that go along with that. So I took that time to invest in myself, which over the years has really stood me in good stead. And once I've gone back to full-time football, fortunately enough, it's actually when I come away from training now and I finish my gym work, I can switch off. I can put my brain to something else. Like I said to you there, with those skills I picked up, me and a colleague, a good friend of mine, Donny Forbes, we set up a Scottish Gaelic football service, FC Sonus, and for me that's sort of something that I run on the side of my playing. And it's been a blessing. It means I can switch off from training, I can switch off from games. And like you said there, full-time football can be very intense, where from the moment you wake up, you're worrying about the game coming up or training, or likewise after a game, the aftermath. Whereas I think it's been very beneficial for me to have something to go and put my mind to and turn off from football, because it can just be so consuming. So I learned a lot from that part-time period. And like I said, it makes you look at football in a totally different way, and also respect these clubs in the lower leagues and their financial situations and where they're at. Because that season with Albion Rovers, if we hadn't drawn Celtic in the Scottish Cup, the club were struggling financially and were looking at liquidation. And that Celtic tie saved the club. We found out at the end of the season that without the money that came in from the Celtic game and the revenue from Sky, the club would have gone under at the end of the season. So that Scottish Cup run and drawing Celtic in a big game financially saved the club. And that's the reality of a lot of these clubs in League One and League Two in Scotland.
I've actually got a question on that, Callum. When you played against Celtic for Albion Rovers, basically, did you feel the tempo was a lot different for a domestic game? Was it a massive step up playing against players at Celtic?
Oh, aye, that Celtic team at the time was some side. In my opinion, I think it's the best side Scottish football has seen in a long time. You know, Musa Dembele playing that game, Patrick Roberts, Scott Sinclair, Stuart Armstrong. The list goes on. You know the team better than I do. You know. And when you go into those games, for me, it was how quickly they move the ball, and not just how quickly they move the ball, but how quickly they shut you down. Although you're Albion Rovers and you're playing in League One, they treated you exactly the same way as anyone else. You know, if you take a touch on the ball, you've got 3 guys surrounding you straight away. That pressing game and the intensity that came with that. Brendan Rodgers drilled that team down to a T, and obviously now with Ange, Celtic I think are seeing a similar kind of style in terms of intensity and aggression with the ball and without the ball. And for me, that was a hell of an experience, because for us, obviously, it was an eye-opening game, but also, as I said, for my opinion, I think that's one of the best Celtic sides and one of the best Scottish sides we've seen in a long time anyway. Hence why they went on to achieve what they did. And in a game like that, it's firmly your backs are up against the wall, and there's a massive gulf in quality. But it's one where you learn when you play against that. You know, you learn how important it is to move the ball quickly, how important it is to shut down and press at that intensity. And a total eye-opening experience. But it's the small margins that make a massive difference in football. It's not so much the gulf and technical ability as that sort of athleticness and tempo that comes with it. That, for me, is the biggest difference between that level and lower levels in Scottish football.
I've spoken to a few people, kind of not on the podcast, just in general, who have played against Celtic and stuff like that, and they were very complimentary about Scott Sinclair. They were saying he's just so quick. It's just amazing. Like the guy's just unbelievably quick. His movement. Was that kind of what you found? Was that really the biggest thing? Was how quick they done things? Obviously, they're technically better than Albion Rovers, but was it the kind of basics of how quick they were that was maybe the difference for kind of the game you normally play at?
Definitely, that's like you're saying there. It's the intensity and the tempo. You know, it's if you're a good technical player and you're training at a level where you can relax and just move the ball from side to side, that's how you're going to play. Whereas if you're training at an intensity every day where you've got to move the ball quickly or someone's going to shut you down or you need to go and press, because if you don't press, you're not getting the ball back and they're just going to keep the ball all day. And as a football player, no matter what tactical game you're playing, you need to have the ball to be successful. And that sort of level of intensity is how Celtic not only trained at that time, but also played. And that comes in two different ways in terms of your decision making when you have the ball. You know you've got to move quickly with the ball, because if you don't, you're losing it. But at the same time, if you don't press as a unit, then you know you can't play the game you want to. So I know you picked out Scott Sinclair there, but for me, Patrick Roberts at his time was frightening. I remember in that game, no one could get anywhere near him. Just so the moment he got the ball, he'd be off, he'd move, dip of the shoulder, and he'd be away. And that's how Celtic's sort of team was drilled to play. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the biggest thing is the intensity that you play at on and off the ball, and that's a big difference, because the technical, obviously, as you said, there obviously is a gulf in technical ability, but less so in terms of the gulf in tempo and sharpness and athletic ability that comes with that.
Because obviously, we've spoken about as well that you've went abroad and played, came out of New Zealand as well. But Canterbury, how was New Zealand? Is that a different kind of culture shock as well? Obviously, from Scotland to New Zealand, obviously you've got the nice weather as well sometimes.
Yeah, totally. No, the lifestyle in New Zealand was incredible. You know, and it's such a beautiful country, and we were every game's a flight, so you're flying around the country, you're getting a chance to see different areas. And you know, the South Island and North Island in New Zealand are so different. If you're into sort of a subtropical climate, the North Island's the one for you, surfing and beaches, and the South Island is more kind of alpine mountains and sort of that outdoor kind of scene. So I was in Christchurch, which kind of had a nice mix of the both. And our team, Canterbury United, had a link to the Crusaders, the massive rugby team in New Zealand. And rugby is everything in New Zealand. It's on a different level, and something that I learned a lot when I was out there was kind of the link between the Maori culture and the Maori kind of traditions and rugby. And basically the All Blacks, we all know the haka, right? We all see it on the TV, but the All Blacks have basically adopted the entire Maori value system and culture approach and have tied that into their national game. Just a wee example, after games, the All Blacks, the biggest players will pick up brushes and brush down the changing room, and they'll clean their own kits, they'll carry their equipment, because the Maori belief is that no person is bigger than anyone else. We're all on the same level, no matter who you are. And those principles applied with us at Canterbury as well. So there's no youth boys cleaning your boots. You were carrying your equipment. You were doing everything as a unit and as a team. So I learned a lot from that, and I took a lot from that myself about how a football club should represent more than just football. You know, it can represent a way of life. It can represent a language, a culture, whatever it may be. And that's I think the biggest thing that I took away from New Zealand was obviously the All Blacks is a elite sporting beast, you know, and it was really interesting how these principles not only filtered through the rugby setup, but actually the football setup there as well.
Yeah, obviously going from Scotland to New Zealand, it must have been a total kind of eye opener as well. A different culture, food, the people, and I think obviously the weather's the biggest thing. But obviously, by the sounds of it, it's kind of manners and respect, and again, that's something I think it's big in football. Or it's more in football these days is the respect for, like you say, the cooks, the cleaners, and the youth players. It's definitely more now than it was maybe 30 years ago. Like you says, if you were told maybe 1920 that you can't play today because they're tired, like you said, you probably get a slap across the face back in the days. But obviously now that's classed as an assault, so that wouldn't happen. Obviously you play with Canada and in Canada. How I know we've spoke as well. It seems to be that it's quite far ahead compared to our game, even though we've got maybe more money or a bigger stature. But for what I'm getting from you, Callum, that the football in Canada, the way they do things, sports science wise, is far ahead of what we are in Scotland.
Totally. No, it's a funny one because for years in North America, Canadian boys and American boys, the holy grail is Europe. You know, they look at Europe and they want to come to Europe because that's the home of football and the culture here. Football is everything. Whereas I think a lot of boys here are now looking across to North America and going, I want to play over there. You know, that's a place I want to play football. And it's definitely one where every sport has its window over there. So, you know, there'll be the ice hockey season over winter, and then there'll be the NFL season and the basketball season and the soccer season tied into that as well. And basically there's so much competition between all of these high level sports that you really have to do everything right, or you're not getting fans and you're not getting support and you're not attracting players to your club. If you cut any corners, you're getting found out. And essentially that they view it as a business from match day to a squad. Everything is about the package and the kind of merchandise and the brand, if you like, of the club. And it's obviously in games in North America and Canada, we lost a game, I think 5-0 to one of the teams in Canada. And there's fans after the game clapping you, saying, "Well done, man! You were excellent today," right? While as in Scotland, if you lose 5-0, someone's waiting outside the ground to tell you how crap you were and to throw a pie at you or something like that, you know? So, I mean, there's those differences, right? They don't have that culture and that sort of intensity in football, but they know that and they try to make up for that in other aspects, which is whether it's providing the players with everything they need or providing the best match day experience for fans. And that's the important word, I think, is an experience. You go to a game over there and your ticket will get you a pint and lunch at 1 o'clock, then a bus to the stadium. Then you get let off for match day. You go into the game. No matter what happens, win, lose or draw, you then get a bus back to the pub or supporters venue, and you have your dinner and you have a drink, and it's a whole match day experience. It's all about the day, and it's not just about the game. The game is a small part of that full package, and that's the way they view it. They view it as sort of selling their product the best they can. One, because they have to, and two, that's just the way in these countries. While as in Scotland, that's not what we do. You know, it's all about 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and that's the biggest part of it. And that sort of, I think, is something that maybe has to change. It's something where we have to encourage people to you know what, your team might have lost today, but at least you've got something else from the experience. You know, you've been able to go out with friends and get a lunch or a dinner with your match day ticket, and that sort of branding and business model is going to leave clubs here behind as these clubs continue to develop. And it's a growing sport over there, and it's one where, you know, if you don't keep making these gains, you are going to get left behind. And as I said, it filters from what you do as a player day to day to how the club conduct itself in the community to the match day experience. It's just the full package over there, and it opens your eyes when you go over there and experience it.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, Cam. I didn't know that myself. I know in Germany you can get a bus and stuff for your ticket, but I didn't know it was basically a hospitality basically for your ticket. which is phenomenal value. Because over here, to get that experience, you need to pay obviously hospitality prices. To get, and that's not even a bus. That's just you getting to the ground and maybe getting a free juice or a free pie and a wee heated seat. So the full product of the game over here, personally for me, has to change. I know money's a big thing in Scotland these days to actually cover the cost, but like you say, if that's what Canada are doing, and I'm sure you might be able to help me here, but I don't think it's a league been going for a long time. It's not really been a long time at all. Scottish football's been going basically since football started. So, and there's a lot of things for me I think we need to do better. But like you say, Cam, you could talk about all this for a long, long time. But I've got another question as well from is it Ewan? He says about VR. Obviously, it's meant to be in Scotland next year. Would that be something you before in general football and in Scotland?
As a player, I think everyone's got their own opinions on this, but VAR for me, I don't personally enjoy it. I think it takes away the sort of, for me, the joy in football is anything can happen in any moment, and it's that reaction to that surprise. If the ball goes in the net, it's that sheer emotion that players feel and fans feel. Everyone's in that together. It's that euphoric moment of sort of togetherness, right? Whereas now you're actually seeing players, they'll score a goal and they won't celebrate because they're looking to see, am I onside? Is this going to get ruled out? Is this goal going to stand? And that takes away for me what football's really all about. Football, as I said, is about no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing during the week, when you come to this game from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock or whenever it is, anything can happen. And we're all in this together, whether you're a player on whatever salary you're on, and the fan and the crowd, you're sharing these moments together. And I think VAR starts to take away from that and starts to change it. Obviously, it's one where these decisions, people look at it and go, well, that's the right decision. That's maybe saved the club from relegation. Or to think of an example that's popped to my head, Thierry Henry does a handball against the Republic of Ireland in a world qualification for the World Cup, which cost them qualification to the World Cup. If VAR had been there, that wouldn't happen, So there's these kind of arguments. But for me, as a striker as well, you're seeing things that are ridiculous now, which is if your nose is offside, you're offside. And that's, I think people underappreciate how hard it is to time your runs in behind the back line. And for me, the benefit of the doubt should always be given to the striker, because no matter if your nose is offside or your finger's offside, you've had to time that run down to perfection to get in behind the back line. And the more and more we bring in these tiny margins for errors, the less and less goals and the less and less action we're going to see for those reasons. And I think it's having a chain effect in our game already. And I think it will continue to have a chain effect. And like, we're obviously talking about business and money. And my sort of fear is that that's what's leading these changes, is businessmen that basically, if my club's going to get relegated and it's going to cost me 100 million, I want to be sure that that's the right decision that's put me down. And I totally understand that, but I think the whole VAR has changed football already and will continue to have its impact on Scottish football if it's introduced, and it's something I personally wouldn't like to see.
Yeah, I'm the same. Obviously, with Celtic and Rangers, there's a lot of penalties out for Rangers. Celtic get this, and Celtic, so there's always going to be talk about it. I'm kind of don't want it, but sometimes you're like, it would be good in this instance. But I think for the whole game, if it's done properly, and like you say, you don't need to wait 3 minutes or 4 minutes to celebrate a goal or get a decision. If it's 15 seconds, then happy days, it's done. But when it's taking too long, like you said, you can't celebrate a goal because you need to wait, and then that celebration's died because you're just waiting the referee's whistle. So I'm like you, mate. I'm not really for it, but if it's done properly, then I'm kind of for it. It just depends how they're going to work it. But obviously, Callum, at the moment, they're still playing. You're involved in the media. What's the future for yourself?
Future for myself is when come the summer, obviously the transfer window is open again, and I can sign a deal because my international clearance will be okay by then, and my registration can go through, which will be fine. So for me, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to getting back playing and to where I want to be. I've definitely got a few adventures left in me, I would say. I don't quite want to settle and play in Scotland for the next few years. There's still some places I'd like to go and experience, and I think one of the things that I've been really lucky to take away from football is it's opened a lot of doors for me to see the world, to go to different countries, to see how different people do things differently. And I've learned so much from these experiences, and I view football firmly as that. You know, I'm at a level where I can get these experiences and can stay in these amazing places, and that's something that I'd like to continue to do. And obviously, you mentioned the stuff I do in the media with FC Sonus, and all of that feeds back into what I want to do after football. You know, all that knowledge I can pass into FC Sonus and developing my own kind of ambitions with the Gaelic football service and stuff that we want to achieve through that, to help basically using football to promote the language and the culture in Scotland. And that's what football is. You know, it's a tool. It's been a tool for me to see the world, and it's a tool that I would like to use to promote Scotland's language and Scotland's heritage. So the way I view it, man, is all the experiences I can gain will stand what I want to do after football in better stead moving forward. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the boots back on soon enough and seeing where I end up.
I think, as I say, during the podcast, there's a lot more we talk about, because I'm just intrigued about footballers and what they do, and there's a lot involved. I think even people listening to this podcast, there's a lot. I know for a fact there'll be a lot that you've said that people don't know about, especially playing at Inverness and playing in Canada, the difference of the way things are worked in these countries. But I really appreciate your time, Cal. It's been a brilliant chat for me, and hopefully the listeners have enjoyed it as well. You can get the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and all listening platforms. But again, Cal, thanks for your time, mate, and take care.
Thanks for having me, mate. Appreciated that. Really enjoyed it.